don't know. I didn't understand most of it.
I rate the strengths in the use of the computers and the graphics and the weaknesses in the actual storyline itself.
I thought it was really great.
Strange story.
Yeah.
Strange story. Inside a computer? It's weird.
Welcome to our film coverage of Tron. If you would like to see the behind-the-scenes videos or earlier scripts, check out our other two preceding videos. Otherwise, let's continue. The first thing about Tron is that whenever there are scenes in the computer world, it is lit by its own energy inside. And like any computer interior, there are dark spaces inside it. During post-production, there are many scenes where the environment does not have a ton of detail and looks unfinished. This is because the production lacked the computer storage to do this, and they also had to rush animation. One of the mottos on the set was, "When in doubt, black it out." Flynn is basically hacking, and you need to remember that in 1982, no one really knew what a hacker was. Clue is his avatar in the computer and is basically spying for dirt on Dillinger's illegal theft of Flynn's creations. With Clue is Bit, and this character was massively diminished from earlier versions of the script, and it's quite a shame. But for those who don't know much about computers, a bit is basically the smallest thing in a computer and can only communicate 1 or 0, which is basically yes or no, true or false. To give you an idea of how small the bit is, it takes about 8 million of them to make up 1 megabyte in your computer. Since a bit is so small, it makes sense that bit can travel around unnoticed in the computer and hides in the debris of a nearby recognizer that Clue destroyed, which Flynn will find later. The core of Tron is that the programs are a reflection of the user that made them. Dillinger is evil, and therefore Sark is evil. Tron is wholesome because Alan is virtuous and searching for the truth. All of this is relative throughout the film with every character you see, and it's intentional. Lisberger saw that while a person asked a computer to do something, the user was basically willing the sole purpose of their programs. Thus we are basically gods to all programs that we command, and you will see religious themes in the film later to reflect this. The chopper at the beginning was covered in red reflective tape and a low-intensity light near the lens of the camera to give it its look. It looks pretty awesome, honestly. Dillinger's desk was elevated so film footage of the computer could be projected from below into the glass of the desk. If you notice outside his office, the view looks like a computer grid, thus mirroring the worlds. Dillinger is the president of the company, and there is a board that he answers to. The creator of the company is Walter Gibbs, who stepped away from running the empire to lead research and development in the laser lab below.
Encom isn't the business you started in your garage anymore.
Sometimes I wish I were back in that garage.
Alan is based off Alan Kay, who was a computer genius. It is noted that Bonnie McBird, who wrote the first 8 scripts, based the character off of him, and she later married him. On the side of Alan's cubicle, you can see the words Gort, Klaatu, Barada, Nikto, which doesn't mean Star Wars figures. It is to honor the classic 1951, The Day the Earth Stood Still. The cubicles in the background mimic the endless computer world that slaves for humanity, and the inverse of that is human slave in the real world for companies. The popcorn worker's name was Roy Kleinberg, who is the alter ego of Ram in the computer, played by Dan Shore. They tried to give Boxleitner a nerdy image, and the best they could do was give him glasses. While Alan is methodical and conforms to following norms, Flynn is his polar opposite. Flynn is emotional and a renegade to the established systems. Thus, both characters counter each other. There was a lot of room for conflict between these two, and the film suggests some, but not much. Back in the day, I never understood how the MCP program was so powerful in both worlds and how it got to that point. The film does make it clear that the MCP is on a contained server that branches out across the world like a web. However, the answers really lie in the January 26, 1981 script, where everything was explained. Flynn created most of ENCOM's systems. Although he was a video game genius, he also did a ton of computer research that laid the foundation for everything that followed, and his work was stolen by Dillinger to make the MCP more intelligent and secure. Of course, Dillinger took credit for everything Flynn did, and in the January script, Flynn would be hesitant to help Alan and Laura because he loves his life as the video game king. But then Alan says this, "And your research helped lead to my conception of the Tron program, and now they've deactivated that. The MCP's gotten so power hungry it's screwing up everything. Air traffic systems, nuclear missile silo systems, people's lives are in danger." Now, if you want to say this sounds like Terminator, you would be right. And remember, Tron was 2 years before Terminator came out. In the finished product, we learned that the MCP was originally designed to be a chess program, and this was also verified in other material.
Remember the time we used to spend playing chess together?
Yes, I'm old. Old enough to remember the MCP when it was just a chess program.
The MCP grew thanks to its focus on strategy and critical thinking. It is suggested that the digitizing of matter are experiments to repair damaged things, because in earlier versions they digitized a cut orange into a whole one. However, in most commentaries and interviews, they try to claim that they are digitizing to repeat or reflect beaming in Star Trek. So in the end, you pick what you think is right, and that's that. If you have any questions why the film is not rated G, besides Sark's death at the end, just remember the dialogue between Flynn and Alan talking about Laura leaving her clothes on the floor in Alan's rooms.
She still leave her clothes all over the floor?
Flynn.
No.
Alan!
Well, I mean, not that often.
This scene makes it clear that Flynn once had a relationship with Laura, and this would be confirmed by the actress because she specifically kisses Flynn at the end of the film due to this past relationship, and we go into that later. Laura is now dating Alan, and this is why Laura's program, Yori, is close to Tron in the digital world when they reunite. Thus, everything in the computer world mirrors the reality of the user world. The door here is real, and it was at the Lawrence Labs location because they used it for experiments that had volatile and sometimes toxic chemicals. Thus, the door protected from possible contamination or radiation. Cindy Morgan accidentally stepped in the wrong place by the door. That was roped off, and the entire production stopped to decontaminate her. Now, there is a debate about the colors in Tron. Blue is supposed to be good programs and red is evil, but Clue was yellow, and during the film, there are blue programs that serve Sark driving tanks, while Ram's light cycle is red. The director stated that whenever there's intense emotions, red colors appear. Whatever the case, Tron is a Zen master and stays blue throughout the film, whatever his emotional states. Another thing to realize is that the clothing in Tron has meaning as well. New programs or conscripts have a half tunic, which is why Flynn has this outfit. If you are an experienced program, you have no tunic. Now, what's going on in this system is perfectly similar to what happened in Rome long ago. Anyone believing in the users are rounded up and put into an arena to die for their beliefs. The allegory is obvious. Bernard Hughes was the elder statesman of the crew. He was completely trusting of the filmmakers, as he couldn't relate to the concept of the film.
I was catapulted into it, I think. I had a great feeling, as I did when I was in the Army, that a lot of things didn't make any sense to. And just as I trusted General Eisenhower, I trusted somebody up there in Disney that really knew what we were doing.
Boxleitner practiced quite a bit for the disc battles, but Lisberger assumed he didn't. One day he cornered Boxleitner about it.
I don't think you've been doing the work you need to be doing, and I want to see what you can do. We're going to be shooting this thing this week, and blah, blah, blah. And it got a little... And I think he was... And I'm sure of it now. He was kind of really trying to anger me. get me up there. And I said, it's like, oh, you want high noon? Is that what you want? You want a showdown? Okay. And he was up on a big ladder, and he shot it straight down at me. And I caught that thing, I think it was like the first take. I just, boom, like there. And I just looked up at him defiantly. And he just yelled, cut. And then he just broke into a big grin with that beard of his. And, he thought, that's it, man. And everybody was going, whoa,
RAM is a program that lives to obey commands and therefore easily follows the other two wherever. His enthusiasm to be a dutiful program for users is pretty much the beginning and end of this character's motivation, and Dan Shore portrays this well. He will follow anything, as he basically is a servant, while Tron is very rigid and follows his orders to the letter. Yet since Flynn works towards Tron's goals, he obeys him and will leave designated areas if it means fulfilling his objectives. Hey, all you 80s kids and teens, do you see something right here? Look, Pac-Man hasn't finished eating all his pellets. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it moment. When Ram dies, Dan Shore's 92-year-old grandmother would make a campaign to re-res Ram.
She started writing and had all her little Hadassah friends in New York writing. Just the words, re-res Ram, re-res Ram.
Now, Yori's function in the computer was to be an engineer like her user, and she's a specialist in digitization of simulations within the grid. This is why, in the deleted scene, she can materialize her apartment and clothes, and this is why Tron is so amazed by it. In this deleted scene, they arrived at Yori's apartment after being on the run. The apartment is bare, Tron thinks it's ugly, and Yori manifests furnishings and a new set of clothes. Then there are sexual innuendos, followed by a morning scene.
Imagine this is the domain. We're here, and where you want to go can be reached by this circuit. And if we follow it all the way...
The deleted scene in Yori's apartment was the only suggested sex scene between any characters in any Disney film at that time. Perhaps that was the reason why it was cut. An interesting thing about Yori is that she has no identity disc throughout the film, and this goes for Dumont as well. Dumont was eventually designed by Mobius, and this character is an old program who has the power to communicate directly with users. But because MCP doesn't want any communication going out from the computer, Dumont is relegated to guard over the beacon, and if any communication gets out, he's responsible for it. When Tron eventually sends his message to his user, Alan, Tron is bathed in a bright light, and many state that this is a religious allegory, and it's supported by Lisberger himself factually. When talking to his maker, he is given instructions to provide salvation for all in the computer as well. The line, "God created us in his own image," is very indicative of what we see in Tron. The downside is that cyberspace makes us feel we know everything when we don't. I really believed in cyberspace as having to do with the future and the unknown, and therefore being a mirror of the best and worst in us. That was all in there. And the years that have gone by, people come up to me and say, "Are all those spiritual concepts in there intentional?" They really are. During the solar sail scene, you can see Yori wearing a helmet suddenly, instead of her tight-fitting cap. This was because Cindy Morgan asked to have a helmet because of the painful glue that kept the previous cap on her head. Now, Flynn is interesting because he literally turned into another program to disguise himself by soaking up the Red Guard's energy, something only a user could do. And he uses this disguise to get on the solar sailor. But now I gotta speak about 3 problems that hit me in the film, 2 right about here, and the other throughout the rest of the movie. The first is, why did Kevin Flynn go after Tron instead of helping him with the bad guys? It's a minor nitpick, but wouldn't he be worried that Tron might get thrown off the solar sailor? Or Tron might throw him off since he's such a good warrior. Then there is the failure to express how profound the story moment involving the presence of Flynn, a user, when it is revealed to the programs. After all, users are gods to the programs, and yet when Flynn finally reveals what he is, the reaction is no big deal.
I'm what you guys call a user.
You're a user?
I took a wrong turn somewhere.
But if you are a user, and everything you've done has been according to a plan, right?
This is a moment where the director should have said, I need a little more emotion. You're talking to one of your gods here. If they stuck to the tone of the earlier script we covered in part 1, it would have monumentally helped this film, and I will state right up front that this is one of the huge strengths in Tron Legacy, but that's a video for later this year. The final big problem for me has always been the score. I don't mean to ruffle feathers of fans of this score, but I'm an extreme lover of soundtracks and have hundreds of film scores in my personal library. But Tron was never even a thought to join them. I always felt that the score lacked life and depth. For instance, in this track, there is no tension whatsoever. And then there's this one. Can you feel the tension here too? And this example is just from a short bit from the movie. There's a lot more of this throughout the film. It just felt like filler music rather than something catered for a scene. And the score is not something I could imprint a lot of emotions on. I can't imagine myself driving with the score or doing other things listening to it. It specifically sounds electronic, which fits the movie, but beyond that, I never felt it was more. As the solar sail flies forward, keep your eyes open for Lake Mickey Mouse. It's another blink and you'll miss it moment. The kissing scene with Yori was Cindy Morgan's desire to put in the film. She felt that since her user once had a relationship with Kevin Flynn, the program would therefore have a natural and familiar attraction to him, and therefore give in to it. Originally, at the end of the film, it was Lisberger's desire to have Yori enter the real world with Flynn when he left the computer, and then she would become human. Whether this was filmed or not, I don't know, but it was a desire of the director, and fitting the scene into the film became a problem. Thus it was abandoned. Tron Legacy would achieve this concept. After the film came out, it didn't last long in theaters. The Academy Awards even refused to acknowledge Tron for special effects due to it not understanding computer animation. Shortly after the Academy Awards, Tron was released on the Disney Channel on April 18, 1983. Its VHS debut was 4 months prior on December 1st, 1982, which was around the purported original release date of the film. Back in 1982, I was 10, and everyone was going to see E.T. As a boy, I wasn't into animation much. In fact, I avoided cartoons. I preferred anything but animation. Don't ask me why. When I heard of Tron, I thought it was an animated movie, and kind of ignored it, even though I was the target audience for the film. My other problem was that I didn't know what computers really were back then. Home computers were not that common, especially in low-income areas. Sure, I saw computers in entertainment like Star Trek, but it was more fiction than reality for me. The closest thing I got to computers were video games, and because I had to be very selective with my money, I rarely went to arcades. I would rather spend my money on trading cards, figures, or a movie once every 4 or 5 months. So Tron was not on my radar at all. When I finally saw it on VHS, I hated it as a child. I just didn't get it. The idea was so foreign to me back then. I thought Tron was for computer nerds, and I wasn't one of them. I continued to dismiss Tron and didn't see it again for over 25 years. And then finally, I watched Tron Legacy, and that film made me revisit the 1982 movie. At that point, I had a completely different perspective, and I was now well versed in computers, networks, or internet. This stuff was now common knowledge, so I began to take the movie more seriously. But to be honest with you, I'm still not that computer savvy. As of the release of this video, I still don't own a cell phone. Yes, I am one of those folks. I don't do social media outside of YouTube, and I stubbornly collect physical DVDs and physical systems like Super Nintendo, PlayStation, and GameCube, as I prefer that media over streaming. But I will acknowledge that if this movie was made today and never premiered in the 80s, it would completely fit today's technology. It just goes to show how prophetic it was. Though Tron had an uphill battle with me, I eventually came around, and today I enjoy the film. I will give Tron Legacy credit for causing me to reevaluate the film. When I started research for this film, I did so with minimal enthusiasm. It was an okay movie that was entertaining, but as I read multiple books, watched countless interviews, panels, and special features, learning more about the film and the details within the movie, the more my interest grew. I went from seeing Tron as something to ignore as a 10-year-old to something I'm now interested in. Thus, such evaluations sometimes brings better clarity to movies, and that's why we do what we do at this channel. Tron has a crafty story, and there were lots of details. My problem with it was that I had to dig for those details to reach a large level of enjoyment. I think that is the only failing of the film, because a lot of things in Tron were not really explored and explained to their potential, especially in a time when most, especially kids, knew nothing about networks. When I was 10, I felt the concept was confusing, and the details were too rushed. I vividly remember Yori kissing Flynn, and my reaction was frustration, because she seemed to be in love with Tron, and it really confused me. The film didn't specify that Yori recognized Flynn because of her user in the movie. There were other things, but you should be able to get what I'm trying to lay down here. It's a fun film, but honestly, I think the movie needs 10 more minutes to smooth out the details and perhaps expand on things that we at the time didn't quite comprehend. Today, I pretty much get all the details, even the ones barely hinted at in the movie, and it's subtle. Much in the same fashion, Episode 1 had its details executed. Tron wanted a very intelligent and more up-to-date audience, and I guess when I was 10, I wasn't that. My own children are a different story. My 16-year-old son loved Tron Legacy, and my oldest did the first time he saw it. But they come from a cell phone, computer-savvy culture, so why wouldn't they identify with this film? It just goes to show how relevant and ahead of its time Tron was. For me, Tron is more art than anything. It is a melding of many technologies and is analogous to Alice in Wonderland, not only for the characters, but for the audiences in 1982. And it's one of the reasons why I appreciate it a lot more today. And that ends our coverage of Tron. But it's not over, because around October, we intend to cover Tron Legacy. Next week, we will begin our coverage of The Hitcher. And I'm still going to preach that you not treat your computers badly. Some people just can't hold back their temper when dealing with technology. We will see you next time. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps a ton. Sharing helps as well.